Sam here. Today we are going to answer the question, what is exotherm? Now, exotherm stands for exothermic reaction. And basically what that is referring to is the heat that is generated in the chemical reaction when a two-part adhesive cures. Now, here at Big Dog Adhesives, we make methyl methacrylates, which is a two-part adhesive, whether it's a 10-to-1 or a 1-to-1 like our 300 here. So when that resin mixes with that catalyst and it's mixed up, it starts to kick off a chemical reaction, and that chemical reaction heats up, and that heating process is what creates that really strong bond between the material and the adhesive. So when I first shot the video, I squeezed out this pile of adhesive. I was taking the temperature. When I was getting to the editing process, I realized you guys can't even read the temperature that's on the camera. Now, we've been doing this for a couple years, and after several thousand views, we know that we get a lot of comments. And I knew immediately, oh my gosh, when I'm telling them and reading this temperature, they are not going to believe how hot this is going to get. I know there's going to be comments like, there's no way it's getting that hot. So I went back and I put out the remaining bit of cartridge adhesive I had in here. If you can see, it's a little bit smaller pile. So I basically held this in front of the camera, scanned it as it was getting started, scanned it during the process, and I also took the temperature when it was at full peak exotherm. Now, this is a smaller pile of adhesive than this one. You know, I was reading the temperatures. That was the real temperatures that I was reading on this one. This smaller pile was probably about 10 to 15 degrees cooler during peak exotherm than the bigger pile. Had there been more adhesive, it would have been on par. But I just want to let you guys know, we try and be 100% transparent and forthright in what we're doing. I don't want you guys thinking that I was switching or trying to make anything up. These are the two adhesives that you saw curing in the video. And I think you're going to really like the video today. Today is a very hands-on, very visual description of what exotherm is and why, regardless of what the material or substrate is you're working with, this is why you need to consider the exotherm and make sure that you are using the adhesive that is correct for the application at hand, right? I also want to point out, I probably should have worn safety glasses and PPE, but I was a little excited to get started, and I'm hoping you guys can forgive me for not wearing the proper safety gear during this highly dangerous video. So with that, let's dive into what is exotherm. Sam here. Today we are going to talk about exotherm. Now, a lot of people ask us, what is exotherm? What does that mean? Why should I be concerned about it? And today we're going to try and answer those questions in the most basic way. And so basically, exotherm is the heat created by the chemical reaction in a two-part epoxy, right? This is a two-part epoxy. It's a 1-to-1. You've got the resin and the catalyst. This guy here is a two-part epoxy. It is a 10-to-1. You've got your resin and the catalyst. When that catalyst reacts with the resin, heat is created, and that heat is what kicks off that chemical reaction to cure that adhesive. So we're going to discuss this a little bit further as we go along. I do want to get this going because we're going to try and show you what exotherm is in the most literal sense today and show you how that works. So I've got our 1-to-1, our BD300 here. I'm going to get this loaded in the gun. It'll probably take about 5 to 10 minutes. For this guy to kick off. It's pretty hot out here, so it might go pretty quick, but I figure I'll get this going, and then we can kind of discuss exotherm while we're waiting for the excitement to come. So, got my adhesive in here. Like in all of our videos, we're going to burp this adhesive, and we're going to make sure we got both resin and catalyst coming out. I know this is just a demo, and basically we're just trying to have some excitement, but how you practice is how you play. So make sure that your team is always in the habit of burping your adhesive, putting your new tip on, making sure there's no plugs in there, and then purge out some adhesive here to make sure you've got a good mix of resin and catalyst. Now, again, the one time you don't do this, you're like, oh, I don't need to do that, that's going to be the time it screws up and you're going to be kicking yourself. So always practice, always do it this way, and you won't have any issues. Now, I am going to just go ahead and crank out a ton of adhesive here. The more adhesive you have, the bigger exotherm reaction you will get. So I'm just going to pile this on here so that we can see this exotherm reaction and you guys can see what I'm talking about. So that is probably more than enough adhesive. We should be able to get a good reaction out of that. Now, I just put the adhesive out. I got my temperature gun here. This is currently at 89 degrees, so 89.4 degrees. as that chemical reaction takes place, it is going to start to heat up, and that is what causes the concerns with exotherm. If you have a very thin material and you've got those put together and this gets super hot, it can distort those materials. So what affects exotherm is the chemistry of the adhesive. Some resins are hotter than others, so that's going to affect it. So you've got the chemistry of the adhesive. You've also got the material and thickness, right? If you have a big joint and you've got a lot of adhesive in there, kind of like this, the more adhesive there is, the faster and the more high temperature it's going to be created because you've got a lot of adhesive there, right? There's a lot more fuel in the fire, to say. If it was less adhesive, you're not going to get quite as hot of a reaction. The other thing that affects it is ambient temperature. What temperature is it outside here? Today is a pretty moderate day. It's probably 87 degrees here in Dallas, so we have a pretty moderate temperature here. But if you were in Arizona and a very high working temperature, right, this could kick and get a lot hotter. And then also confinement. Right here, we've got a lot of open air around it. If this was in a very confined space, that heat's going to be building in there and you're going to get a bigger reaction. Now, again, why is this important? Kind of as we discussed, if it gets too hot, it could distort or it could warp the material you're working on, right? If you're a sign company and it distorts your print on the outside, you're going to have some distortion there and it's not going to look very good. So you're going to want to use something with a low exotherm if that's a thin panel. So that way it heats up gradually over time, but it doesn't heat up enough that it's going to warp the outside of that panel. Now, aesthetic issues, right? If it heats up too fast, it could burn that material. It could cause the warping. It's visually going to have a bad appearance if it heats up too fast. Now let me take a break here. You see where we're at? We're now at 99 degrees right here, 99.1. So we started in the 80s. We're already at 99 degrees. It's been maybe a minute. So you can see this is definitely getting hotter. And the other thing is safety concerns, right? If you leave a pile of adhesive like this and you've got a ton of it there and it's unattended and there's an ignitable source there, it could catch on fire, right? When I was in high school, I used to do these carbon fiber fiberglass resin. They were almost like we wrapped the resin and the fiberglass around like knee supports for pro athletes. If they had their legs damaged, we would build these custom supports and knee braces. And one time I did, the guy did not tell me that if I leave a pile of resin mixed with catalyst in a cup that it would catch on fire. So if you are working with something like this, you should probably tell your employees, hey, don't ever leave something like this. If the chemical reaction is hot enough, it could start a fire. Well, I had mixed all this stuff up. I was in high school, wasn't paying attention. I left it there. The guy had a basement that was a shop. It was this massive home out in Mesa, Arizona. And the guy had like an R&D lab, kind of like it was like kind of a walkout basement in the mountains. And I left this resin in there. And apparently after I went home, like 10 minutes after I left, the resin kicked off and caught fire in his basement. Needless to say, he was not too pleased when I got there the next day. But then again, I had no idea that could even happen. So it can. Know that anytime you're mixing resins with catalysts, whether it's polyurethanes or it's acrylic resins or polyesters or adhesive, anytime there's a chemical reaction taking place, that does generate heat. And if there is enough of it there, it could cause a fire. So definitely a safety concern there. So if you are working with stuff that you know heat is an issue, be sure and let your adhesive supplier know, hey, I'm working with thin gauge here. I can't have any heat distortion. Exotherm is a concern, because we can make sure that we get you a glue that is going to be low exotherm so you don't have those worries. So here we are. It's been about another minute. I'm doing this. We're now at 117 degrees. So 116. I don't know if you guys can see that, but it's basically 116 degrees. It's still building. We probably not another couple minutes before we really get to the excitement, and you guys can see we're now almost up to 120 degrees. So this has gone up almost 30 degrees here in just 2 minutes. That's a pretty big temperature build. If you put your hand over it, you can feel that. So how do you mitigate exotherm, right? That's, if you guys are concerned about it, how do you make sure and mitigate that? The first thing is, make sure you're using the right adhesive for the application that you're working on, right? If you need a low exotherm adhesive, ask for a low exotherm adhesive and make sure that your rep is getting you what you need. The other thing is allow for airflow around that product, right? Here we've got plenty of airflow. It's not going to kick off. If you had it in a very confined, sweltering area, that's just going to, add fuel to the fire and make it get hotter. And also, you can apply your adhesive in thinner layers, right? If you're bonding very thin materials that are prone to exotherm or burn through or anything that's going to distort, put that adhesive on in a very thin layer and don't get it on there thick. Because if it gets there too thick, now here we go, we're starting to get to the fun part. So I'm going to be quiet. Can you hear the sizzling? It's starting to bubble. I'm going to put my thermometer on here. We're at 191 degrees, 187, look, it is starting to smoke. We're at 214 degrees, 250 degrees, 225. You see the smoke? It's coming. So this is what we're talking about in exotherm. This is exotherm in the worst case possible. We're at 261 degrees, 266, 73, 87. So, I mean, this is very hot. You can see the smoke coming off of it. This is what we're talking about when we talk about exotherm. When you have a ton of adhesive there, it's going to be more prone to heating up and doing that. You can see it sizzling. That's just like bacon cooking. So, again, this is why exotherm is important, right? I don't think, I don't want to warp my countertop here, but this is why it's important. You can see this guy is kicking off. We're now at 292 degrees, 282 degrees, 285, depending on where I put it. I mean, this is getting hot. So you can imagine if this was like a thin gauge aluminum composite panel and you've just piled the adhesive in like this, you can see the smoke coming up here in the air. You can see it bubbling. That would definitely distort your panel, right? You've done all this work, you've printed, you've got everything together, whether it's an aluminum composite material in the sign industry or you're working on a very thin fiberglass or a composite in the boat industry. This could distort those panels, or it could burn it, it could turn it yellow, it becomes an aesthetic issue, right? So we just want to make sure that this is something you're taking seriously. It is a safety concern, right? Let's see where we're at now. We're at 257 to 236, so we're definitely coming down, right? The chemical reaction has taken place. The heat rise has built. It's reached its crescendo. It was roughly around 280 to 290 degrees, and now it is coming back down. So that chemical reaction and that heat is what generates the cure and makes the adhesive kick off. So if you were to look at this, it's getting very hard now, right? This is no longer a pliable adhesive. It is kicked off and it is getting solid. So I thought this would be a good demonstration on what exotherm is. I thought it would be a good visual so that you guys could see, right? I mean, going from 190 degrees up to, go from basically 90 degrees up to 280 degrees is a huge temperature swing, right? If you had something that was very sensitive on there, it would damage it or destroy it. So really pay attention to exotherm. It's one of those things that I think maybe you're aware of, maybe you're not. But if you're working with high dollar materials, you do not want your materials to be damaged by the adhesive. So you want to make sure that you are matching the materials you are working with the appropriate adhesive. So hope this answers some questions on what exotherm is. Hope you guys got a good visual here and understand. Like I say, we had almost a 200-degree temperature in the heat up of this big pile of adhesive. And that is what exotherm is. It is the heat generated by the chemical reaction in a two-part epoxy, particularly with MMAs. If you guys have any questions, give us a call, shoot us an email. We love helping you take your business to the next level.